going inside the issues of our community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. Anyone interested in the future dynamism of the Center City knows the key is healthy school systems. New condos and entertainment districts can attract young professionals and empty nesters, but without good schools, middle-class families will exercise their franchise by moving to the suburbs. Over the last 5 years, Cincinnati public school students have improved their statewide test scores, making CPS the highest performing big city district in the state, and an ambitious billion-dollar facilities program is upgrading every classroom in the system. But the public image is dominated by bickering between board and administration. The sudden discovery of a $79 million deficit that forced a $9.95 mil levy to be placed on the fall ballot at the last minute, and the resignation of Rosa Blackwell, triggering the search for the fourth superintendent in 6 years, raises all kinds of issues. The Cincinnati Board of Education is composed of 7 members elected at large. 3 of those seats are up for election this November. Only one incumbent, Rick Williams, is running. Jack Gilligan and Florence Newell decided not to run. That means that at least 2 new people will join the board. I am joined this morning by all 4 candidates vying for those 3 seats. Rick Williams is the president and CEO of Home Ownership Center of Greater Cincinnati. Rick is an incumbent completing his 2nd term on the Board of Education. Eve Bolton is a career teacher at Wyoming High School. From 1993 until 1997, Ms. Bolton served as the Hamilton County Recorder and ran for County Commissioner in Ohio House of Representatives. Chris Nelms operates a inner city program called Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities. He is also a prevention education outreach person for Children's Hospital and has been athletic director at Hughes High School. Michael Flannery is well known from his work at both Channel 19, where he created children's-oriented programming, and at Channel 9, where he created 9 on your side for 9 on your kids' side. There you go. And he is also a parent of 3 children who are in Cincinnati Public Schools. Chris Nelms, by the way, is a grandparent of several children in Cincinnati Public Schools. So, welcome to everybody. This is, as our viewers know and you know, this is a little bit awkward because we've got a lot of people on this set, so we're going to do the best job we can. Let's begin with a question. Earlier this month, a report was done by the McKinsey Group about the relationship of Cincinnati Public Schools and the board and the administration. It raised questions about whether there's a lot of friction between those 2 groups because the board tries to micromanage and the administration sometimes withholds information from the board. A couple of questions. Rick, let's begin with you. Have you read the report? If so, do you agree with it? And what will you do if you're, in your case, reelected to implement some of these changes that they recommend?
Well, actually, the McKinsey Group came to Cincinnati Public to do an analysis of how the central office functioned. So that was the main reason they were there. So it's a very comprehensive report, and it talks about all the different departments of Cincinnati Public and how they deliver services to the field. The governance piece, the board part, was just one small part of a total view of the business side of the district and how it operates. So a lot of that work is being implemented as we speak, and it comprises the components of the McKinsey report, and then it starts to mix with.
Do you think this report, though, put its finger on problematic relationships on the governance side about the board and the way the board operates?
Well, let me say how the report was done. The report was done based on interviews, not really observations. So I can't really tell you what the basis of that conclusion is other than what they were told. So a lot of the parts of this is a presentation of what they were told, not an analysis of what they saw. Do I agree with it? Depending on the situation and the topic, that could be the case.
What about the question of micromanaging?
That's what I mean. Depending on the presentation of the topic and the issue, that could be a case of micromanagement depending on how someone wants to see it. My experience is that the micromanagement presentation tends to occur when there is a vote that someone on the board doesn't want. And so, but that's micromanagement. You can't do that. So it's hard to present a presentation that says micromanagement is this line. And so when you cross over that, you're micromanaging. When you stay away from that line, then you're okay. That's a line that's defined by everyone. And like I'm saying, it's usually used as a way to manage a situation around voting.
Okay. Eve, have you had a chance to read the report? And if so, what about this particular question about governance?
Yes, I have had an opportunity. The people at, I think, KnowledgeWorks shared the report with me because I was fascinated by the fact that the board indeed wanted to have the report, and I think that's a good sign. But the reality is, like other school systems, large and small, in the last 25 years, administration has grown too big, and boards have become probably too intrusive and not as visionary as they need to be. And I think the report kind of points that out. I think you have to kind of reduce.
So if you were on the board, how would you be different than what exists now?
I think what you have to do first is you probably have to reduce to a certain extent the function of the central office and the size of the central office. Second, the board has to be very clear that it's supposed to be visioning and setting goals and not necessarily being 7 different superintendents. There also has to be trust between the new superintendent and the board that their mission and their vision will be carried out. Whoever's going to be on the new board is going to be dealing now with a lame duck superintendent and a board that's lost some credibility. So
And
I think we do need to implement the report.
We will get to this question of
Great,
a
thank
future
you.
superintendent at the second part. Chris, what about this? If you had a chance to read this report, and if so, what do you think about the relationship of board and superintendent and the way the board operates?
I'm aware of the report, and one of the things that I discerned from reading the report was that there were some things that do need to be meshed out, do need to be looked at, either microscopically. I do feel that if I was on the board, one of the things that I would stress would be to allow for the process to work itself out. You give the superintendent her instructions, her directions, and let her carry out those instructions and those directions and report back to the board in a process that's already established.
Okay. Michael, what about you? And
Can
this
I borrow
report?
this?
Can you? Yeah, sure.
Because I've been trying to get one and I couldn't. I was up to about 2 in the morning on the internet and couldn't find it. But if you're done with this,
Yeah, go ahead.
I've heard about different aspects of it, and there's 1 or 2 that I can say that I've run into that were true, as far as
For example?
the administration holding information close, even with the media.
Okay. Close in a way that interferes from people like board members getting the information they need to make decisions, you think? Or parents?
When was the last time anybody cheered for Cincinnati Public Schools? You see people every Sunday going down wearing orange and black. Even if the Bengals are losing, they have pride in the Bengals. We're not getting information about the public schools until it gets to a point to where we have a huge deficit that nobody knew about. Then it's on the news. So how can anybody get behind a tax levy or anything else when everything is a secret?
And so what would you do? What would you recommend to change that dynamic?
Open information between the media and the school and the schools, with protecting the kids first. Don't use that, don't hide behind that to keep everybody out, but protect the kids.
Okay. I want to go on. There's the administration recently made an announcement that it plans to tear down a number of buildings that have previously been slated for renovation. Some of those, like the Westwood School that we're seeing right now, is really key to certain neighborhoods and school and the people in those neighborhoods, not just parents, but the people in those neighborhoods, like in Westwood, don't want that school to go away. Couple of questions here. One, what's your position on this specific thing that's happening right now during this campaign? And secondly, I want to raise the question, how can the school system make a proposal like this just before people are going to vote for a levy and stir people up? I mean, it just seems to me incomprehensible that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing or something. Chris, you want to comment on neighborhood schools?
Well, I would have to say the master facility plan is well in place. And I know that I attended Bloom School, and it was considered
West
a
End.
neighborhood in the West End. It was considered a neighborhood school. And in some cases, neighborhood schools are vibrant for the maintenance of the infrastructure in that particular school. People gravitate to communities based on where they can send their kids to school. I think a process have to be established where you sit down and look at whether or not it's proactive for the community, the neighborhoods, and the kids. Remember, the primary function of a board member is to make decisions that's for the best interest of all of the kids and the welfare of that community and its parents.
Michael, what do you? I heard you say something. Do you live in Westwood?
I live in Westwood.
What do you think about this
It's a
particular-
beautiful school. I only know what you know, so I can't say, well, if I'm elected, that school stays. I'd like it to stay. I want it to stay.
Okay.
And they said they're saving $3 million. But it's, you can't, I can't tell you right now what I would do because I don't know all the information. Until you know it, you can't do it. I want the schools to stay. They're also talking about Clark Montessori School in Hyde Park.
Yeah, which architecturally.
No aesthetic, yeah.
Yeah, architecturally, who cares?
Exactly. You can't even see it from the street anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Tear that one down.
Rick, what about this? There have been a lot of hard decisions as a board member you've had to make about schools with a facilities plan. What about this particular cluster of decisions, this neighborhood school situation, and also the question of the announcement and the timing?
Well, I need to I'll address the timing first. We are a public entity, and as we talked about in the first question, the desire to have more things public, and then in the second question deal with, well, how stupid was this to go public? The bottom line is we're a public entity. As much as we want, the board wants this public conversation, and so it was presented to us to consider the possibility of not renovating this building and creating a new one. And we instructed them to have the conversation with the neighborhood. This is not a decision made to do this. We're beginning that conversation. So as we move toward hearing what they want to do with the property and them understanding the financial ramifications, then we can come, I hope, to some agreement on
Does
how
the
what should
system
happen.
need to be better, though, at its communications function then?
Absolutely. Not only is it the communications function, it's the engagement function, which is a different piece. And it allows for conversation to be occurring on such a regular basis that when we have these types of issues emerge, there's a trust level that's the foundation for hearing the opportunity that could occur with that site.
Eve, what about this issue for you?
Well, as a person that was on the campaign trail when the great, wonderful bond issue was passed, which I think was the single most important thing that's happened in Cincinnati in 25 years, I heard promises made to neighborhoods. And the reality, if we're going to try to rebuild trust, first and foremost, those promises have to be kept. And one promise that was made to the community in Westwood was that major profile, that persona of that neighborhood, that heart of that neighborhood center area was going to stay, and they were going to renovate. Spending the least dollars is not always as good as spending the best dollars. So I think the cost-benefit analysis of eliminating an architectural gem like that, or a heart of a neighborhood as strong as Westwood is breaking a promise, and you can't rebuild trust by breaking promises made previously.
Okay. We have to take a break, but we're going to be right back, and we've got a lot of issues, both the new superintendent and the tax levy that's on the ballot. Stay tuned.
This is online.
You can have it. I've got one more VO, so I'll be going pretty quickly to be. Welcome back. My guests this morning are the 4 candidates for the 3 seats on Cincinnati Board of Education this fall. Now, we've got a couple more topics I think we can get to, and I want to start with the question of the superintendent, because this is very important. If you're elected to the Board of Education, you'll be part of a search for the 4th superintendent in 5 years, using the strengths and weaknesses of the last 3 superintendents, Steve Adamowski, Alton Fraley, and Rosa Blackwell. What are the strengths that you'll be looking for, and what traits will you try to avoid in the search for a new superintendent? Eve, let's begin this one with you.
Well, I think the major strength for Rosa Blackwell was her familiarity with the district and familiarity with the city. I think that's a great strength. Whoever this is going to be needs to hit the ground running and needs to be able to understand who to trust and who to worry about almost instantly, not only on the board, but in her administrative team and also those other folks that guide what's going on. So I would look for that strength. I'd also look for somebody that is very, very, very well aware of the new sorts of visioning regarding testing of children, like value added, which is a brand new thing to be doing, which we need to be doing, especially in our lower achieving neighborhood schools. And I would also concentrate on somebody that knows that 65% of the children that attend Cincinnati Public are categorized by the state as being economically disadvantaged. We've got to find somebody that has an appreciation for that challenge that we have in the classroom.
Michael, let's go over to you. What would you be looking for in a next superintendent?
I'd like to find a school district that was in the same position we are now and got out of it, and find who did that and get them at any cost. Somebody who's been here and somebody who cares about the kids. And that's what I'm going in for.
Okay. Are you looking at other school systems around the country? Do you point to something and say, gee, that one interests me, I like what they're doing there?
I have a Google search out now for a news search, school superintendent.
Okay.
So any place around the country that has news about a school superintendent, I'll get a copy of it.
Okay.
And I'm watching those.
Rick, you've been through this before. These are the most important decisions. I think
Absolutely.
I'm quoting you here from when you were president. This is the most important decision a board makes, the hiring of a superintendent. What are you looking for this time?
In preparation for this act, which is the most important thing that we can do, I believe the first thing we need to do is to reconfigure the district and then hire a superintendent to run that Cincinnati Public.
What
it's
does
very
that mean?
consistent. It is understanding, it's similar to what Mr. Flannery is saying. The condition that we are in today, it's not just about one person coming in and saving the day. It's accepting that. It is understanding that structurally there's some changes that have to be made. There are assumptions about how we've been operating for decades. For example, we have an agriculturally based schedule that says you're out during the summer so that you can do farming, which is where that comes from. Why are we doing that today? Why are we not challenging all of who we are to understand what's best for today's rigor, today's education values, what's best for children today? And it is about challenging that and not expecting someone to come in and do that challenge for us, and then hiring someone who's consistent with those values.
You've been on the board for 8 years. Have those issues, are we any place, I mean, we're not going to get those done before we hire a superintendent, are we? I mean, you've been there, you know how difficult it is to change things, right?
I do know how difficult it is to change things, but I also know that timing matters with change. And the condition that we are in today, I believe, offers that opportunity to make some changes that have been needed for a long time, but cannot happen until we're in a plight situation. And we are in that plight situation today.
Okay, so.
Driven by our finances.
Driven by finances, we're going to get to that in a second.
Yes.
Chris, what about you? What do you think about a superintendent, a leader for the administration?
What I look for in a superintendent is someone that's connected to the community and not necessarily an outsider. One of Rosa's strengths was that she was familiar with the terrain of Cincinnati Public and the city. I also would like a superintendent that's connected in such a way that they're visible, they're accessible, and they're accountable. And I think the last two superintendents that we had was outsiders. And I'm looking for someone that's not going to use Cincinnati Public School as a springboard to further in their careers or padding their resumes before they move on.
You're talking about Adamowski and Fraley.
and Fraley. We need a superintendent. There is a model, as Mike alluded to, that does exist somewhere that we could pretty much bring in, dissect, modify, and make sure it's conducive to what we're attempting to do at Cincinnati Public School. And one of the keys is learning how to work cooperatively with the board, 7 personalities with 7 different philosophical, educational perspectives, and have that superintendent be willing to, number one, communicate, be trustworthy, and to follow the directions that the board dictate at any given time or moment. So I think this is a critical time where we have to find someone that's willing to come in, because it takes about 18 months to understand the dynamics of a community and a city, especially like Cincinnati. So I would prefer to find someone that's presently in-house so that we can maintain the continuity of what's already in place.
Find somebody who can.
Nothing, we won't be able to do anything in January.
Right.
Because anybody who is probably working right now has a job, and they won't be able to get out of it until May or June.
Yeah, but that you have to start the search.
Unless that person's in
It takes a
place.
while to go through these. I mean, once you hire a search firm and all that kind of stuff, it takes a long while to go through this. Yeah, I think you got to be ready to go in January.
I worry also that too much of the search could be done before the new board takes position. And I do think that the preliminaries need to be done, which I know you're working through, but I hope it's only the preliminaries. Because as we all know who have tried to ever hire anybody or think about a new direction, often the groundwork that's laid can kind of predetermine the destination. And I hope that the existing board, the present board, will at least defer to the new board coming in.
And
We
Dan,
absolutely do have that sensitivity
Great.
to understand that there are two board members who won't be there.
continuity is a key. What about the prospect of talking to Rosa into staying until we get through this process at this critical phase with the tax levy, the master facility plan, the strategic plan? That's not a absent or far-fetched possibility.
Rick?
Well, the superintendent's here until next June. So in understanding the timing of a new board that moves into place in January, and a lot of what our goal is around this search is to have a level of community engagement that we've never had before. That is something that we're about to begin now, and you can be a part of it, all three of you, and that piece will drive what happens after that.
I'm aware of time, so I want to move on to a very important question. And Michael, let's begin with you. There is a tax levy. It's a relatively large tax levy on the ballot this fall for the schools. The question here is, where do you stand on this, and what do voters need to know at this moment as they go in to vote for new members of the school board, and at the same time voting for or against this tax levy? Michael, what would you say?
Voters need to know that this is a cost of living increase. When the last one was put on was, I was told, 7 years ago. This isn't the building.
Yeah, it's not the bond issue.
It's not
This
the
is
bond
operating
issue. That's
levy.
done and taken care of. This is for operating money. That money that was done 7 years ago, if inflation went 3%, that's 21%. Can anybody run their house at 20% cut? And that's what they've been doing, 3% every year. So this isn't like we're saying, you know, you always go, oh my gosh, we just gave them money. What are they asking for? What did they do with that money? We spent it, or they spent it
Okay.
on my kids.
Rick, 2 years ago, there was a renewal. It wasn't an increase for 04 or whatever.
Three, yes.
Oh, yeah, 3 years ago. You opposed that levy. If that levy had gone down, if voters had done what you said, would we be, I mean, what kind of situation would we be in now? And where do you stand on this levy?
The opposition of that levy was about the financial management that pretty much put us in the situation we're in now with the size of this levy. The issue was, once we have for years been adding expenses and not connecting that very well to revenues. When we made decisions about contracts at that time, those decisions really escalated the expenditures of Cincinnati Public. And because of that, it really required a redesign at that time, a restructure of Cincinnati Public and how it operates, or we were going to be where we are today, which is damaging, painful cuts at the school level in order to just keep the district afloat.
Do you support this levy?
Yes.
Okay. I am aware of time, so I want to get to the other two candidates here. Eve, where are you on this levy?
I support this levy. I think it's 2 years too late, and I think the renewal was perhaps a year too early. The reality is that's why it has to be so high, and it is high. And I support the levy. I also have to say that I've been very discouraged in the midst of all of this regarding the board being surprised that they were facing an $80 million deficit. I don't know how you get surprised about that if you're actually managing and watching the numbers.
Chris, and we got about 40 seconds left.
Unequivocally support the levy. we have to make a determination if we want to invest in the future of our kids. If we don't pass the levy, then we're looking at a deficit that we'll be forced to deal with in June that will create more cuts. And we have to make a decision, do we want to invest to continue to attract new kids to the district, educate, and graduate?
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Obviously, there's still a lot here. Those of you who are interested in these issues, and we all should be, and especially if you're voters, try to follow this election. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Remember this, another campaign season interviews will be streamed on the Local 12 website. This one's beginning tomorrow. Have a good week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.